Great. So, welcome everyone. This is our April BAT webinar. Things are quickly accelerating in the BAT program, and we have 2 trainings coming up. One is this upcoming weekend on the OP in the Olympic Peninsula and kind of like Bremerton and Silverdale in between there. And then we have another training in, I think, 2 weeks, on the 23rd, over in Ellensburg. So if you have friends that are interested, let them know. They can go to our website, and it's right on our front page is the sign up list, so they can sign up there. And I will say there is a little screw up with the locations on there. So if your friends are like, wait, it says the Olympic Peninsula training, but the location says Ellensburg, tell them to go off of with what the training is, not the location. Trout Unlimited has this weird new software that I had to use, and it was a little difficult. So I figured it out, but it's going to go into effect next time. All right. So today we have Luke Kelly presenting for us. I'm going to give a little intro. Luke is TU's Washington Coast Restoration Program Manager. He received his BA in Aquatic Environmental Studies with an Environmental Sciences track from the University of Colorado. In his 20 years of professional experience, Luke has gained diverse work experience pertaining to sustainable fisheries management and habitat restoration work in freshwater and marine ecosystems. Before joining TU, Luke worked as a biologist for the Suquamish tribe fisheries, which is over in Kitsap. And prior to this, he was the co-founder and senior aquatic biologist for an environmental consulting company based in Colorado. Luke is currently working, which is good. He's currently working with partners to prioritize, develop, and implement impactful habitat restoration projects benefiting salmon and steelhead on the Washington coast. His projects range from in-stream habitat restoration, floodplain and riparian restoration and reconnection, forest road related work to address threats to aquatic habitat, and of course, fish barrier correction projects, which we do all the surveys for. Today, Luke is going to present some of his work to prioritize barriers on the Washington coast, and then he will take us through the story of a particular barrier correction project underway on a Solduck River tributary. And with that, Luke, you can take it away.
Thanks, Nick. Just a sound check. My internet has been really tough today. Can you guys understand me all right?
Yeah, we can now. You were a little laggy earlier, but you're good now.
I'm curious if I start sharing my screen, what's going to happen. But maybe, Nick, if you could keep your camera on, even though it might be delayed for me, you can wave your hands or something. Yeah. Just if we have any technical issues, we're going to have to figure out a backup plan. But I'll go ahead and get going, and we'll see where we can do. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off to save some of my bandwidth from my internet challenges today. Let's see if I can share my screen, and we'll get going. Hang tight, please. Okay, you should see something loading up here pretty soon.
Yep, we see it.
So you can see, okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to the slideshow view. So you guys seeing a full screen view?
We can see it's like 3/4 screen. It's good.
Yeah, the presenter notes. Let me see if I'll swap that over.
No, it's good. I think it's good.
No, yeah, is that better?
Oh, you're good, Luke. I was looking at the video stuff. You're good.
Is it full screen now though?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, great. I think we can work with this. Let me.
Mine's full screen except for the camera images of everybody else on the side.
Great.
I think you're as good as you can get.
Okay. I'm gonna pull my microphone close, and there's a lot of slides here. It's mostly photos, but this is kind of I get a chance to highlight some of my work as a TU staff. So I really appreciate all you all joining on Colbert Tuesday, and I certainly enjoy. I always like to share my appreciation for TU and the volunteers, all of you, that make TU what it is. I think you all probably understand some of TU's history, and I've been a TU staff for about 4.5+ years now, almost 5, and it's a dream come true. So having that kind of full breadth from grassroots volunteer members to field staff like myself, to also having folks in DC, like, affecting federal policy, let alone some of our state and local policy, is sure special. So I just really right up front like to acknowledge that we are all one TU, and feel free to contact me anytime with specific questions. In terms of BAT, we have great resources with Nick and the council. But if you have technical questions, you can route them through Nick, but I'm always approachable. Feel free to contact me. So yeah, here we are. I thank you for the invite, Steve and Nick, to allow me to kind of present some of my work and how we've done some things on the coast. Quick story about me is, in this position, like I said, it was a new position. I'm focused on the Western Olympic Peninsula. So some of those famous fishing rivers like the Hoh and the Quinault and the Queets and the Solduck and the Quileute, Bogachiel and such. And there's been a real data gap there, and we're going to get into that and what we've done. We've actually come quite a long ways in a few years, and look forward to sharing. So stick with me. By all means, feel free to interrupt, but I'll be ready for questions toward the end here. As a lot of you probably understand, that the OP is pretty special, especially the West Side OP has probably the least development of a lot of the Pacific Northwest. And there's a lot of what we would say intrinsic habitat potential there. The runs are definitely declined. They're not what they used to be, but in terms of habitat and reconnecting some of those habitats, what's upstream of some of these barriers is pretty darn good quality habitat. So pretty excited to put forth any efforts we can, whether TU or partners. It's a special place. I don't need to read these verbatim, but essentially, barriers are a problem statewide, and the West OP has approximately 1,100 barriers. Those are only the documented barriers, and you'll see that we went out and did a lot of surveys on hundreds of culverts. Some of them we found were not fish-bearing streams anyway. Some of them were documented and fish-bearing streams, but barriers to correct. And then some of them were actually not documented, but on salmon gillhead streams. So it's basically illuminates the need to really understand that we don't know all the barriers that are actually out there in terms of road, man-made barriers. Barriers have a lot of issues with them, just migration for fish, but there's also natural processes that they will limit. And I have a couple of minor images to illustrate that, but having a stream connection, whether it's large streams or even small tributary streams, that can kind of transport sediment naturally, transport even pieces of wood. Even some of these small culverts will pass a log through them. Well, it's amazing how a small culvert will back up and pond water on the upstream side, and you'll see a log floating around, and it'll find a way to go through it, almost like a toilet bowl. So getting a more connected stream with a larger structure for the stream to pass through is pretty critical. And then it's easy, at least in my terms, for getting project funding, to highlight the infrastructure improvement. A lot of these culverts are 30, 40, 70 years old. So they're definitely some of them at the end of their lifespan, and lots of issues.
Hey, Luke, are you going to take questions now, or should we wait till the end?
You can interrupt, certainly. How long is this going to be? I was trying to aim for 20, 25 minutes, but I'm happy to answer along the way.
20 to 25 minutes of you talking sounds good, and then we can have some questions as well. My bedtime's 8 o'clock. I have to wake up at 3:45 for work, so that's your limit.
Wow. Well, I'm up for either. If you guys want to speak up and ask questions along the way, let's do that. And
maybe it's just a quick question because you had that map up. Are the culverts on the Olympic Peninsula included in that lawsuit resolution for the for Western Washington?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, the state-owned culverts, the state highway culverts are, so particularly Highway 101. Yes, those are part of the culvert injunction case that I would call it. But all of the county roads are not. All of the forest roads, whether they be on commercial forest lands from private timberland companies, are not, and let alone U.S. Forest Service, National Park are not. So it's really state highways that are part of that injunction case.
Thanks.
So does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, I don't need to read this either, but essentially this is kind of 3 or 4 years ago is that we had all of these barriers, as you guys can see on the DFW barrier map, the barrier database that you can see on the web. There's a ton of barriers out there. And in this particular region, we had some data gaps that we noticed. And I'm going to go ahead and advance here and you'll see. But we noticed that the county roads really did not have a lot of barrier assessment done on them. So with partners, we got a grant to go out and do a lot of field work. And then once we kind of filled that data gap with county roads, we are in middle of phase 2 now, which I'll get to, but it's really trying to prioritize these barriers across the landscape and not just based on jurisdiction or opportunistic willingness of a landowner to do work on a road, stream crossing, or culvert barrier. So there's been a multi-phase approach. But essentially, this does involve TU big time, but it involves a lot of other partners. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Again, this is a lot of my day-to-day work, but it is trying to really put together a strategy to have a cost-effective way to take care of the most important barriers first. So here's some of our partners. Wild Salmon Center kind of termed a campaign. They call it the Coldwater Connection Campaign. And they're trying to reconnect and connect as many miles as they can on the Olympic Peninsula. They're starting to do implementation or actual construction now. But really, it's been tried and limited in the last few years. It has done a lot of these, as well as other partners that are not on here, but like the Regional Fishery Enhancement Group and the tribes and a couple other NGOs like the Nature Conservancy has done a lot of barrier work. But these 3 groups are really part of this Coldwater Connection Campaign. And when we're talking about filling data gaps and trying to do the most prioritized barriers first across the landscape, I will proudly say that these groups are kind of leading that effort on the Western OP, and you'll see why in just a minute. So we did, like I mentioned, we're backing up now to phase 1 to fill the data gap for the county road barriers. We needed to get that data. So we went out and basically we surveyed every single culvert under the road of Western Clallam and Jefferson counties on the Western OP. Again, I would say 2/3 of these were not very important culverts, but another third were, and maybe about an eighth of those, about 200 of those are pretty significant barriers. And I would say that we probably, the count changes because of new data, but we identified a couple dozen, if not more, undocumented barriers. So this is just county roads on the Western OP. And once we got that data, we were able to feed and go to the next phase of the project. This is a summary of that county road project. So over 650 barriers, many undocumented barriers. And we're also applying technology like GIS and remote sensing tools to try and do some analysis as to which ones are most important. At the bottom, you'll see a lot of the partners that were involved. And these partners kind of flow into phase 2. And here's just a few pictures. These are the county road culverts. This one's out near Ozette. This actually was not a barrier in the long run, but an unusual survey. We're actually taking multiple cross sections here because this one needed more than just a level B. It needed kind of a full hydraulic analysis, which is pretty unique. Usually if we do a level A and get to a level B, that covers us. But just wanting to show this particular culvert can take a little extra. Here's another one. This is on the Lower Hoe, surveying along. Probably looks familiar to all of you that have been out there. This one I just included. This is one that we completed. This was a borderline barrier, but because the Forest Service wanted to actually abandon the crossing, we pulled this pipe. It's about a 13-foot wide pipe. We completely removed it, and we call it an open channel restoration. So the road prism was removed, and now there's a natural stream channel going through there. But you'll notice that the image on the lower right is a pretty basic topo image. It is real topo. It doesn't have elevations on there, but that kind of image really shows this particular culvert, how it chokes the stream. The stream is much wider than that. It wants to open up and connect to its floodplain, but at the road crossing, it really gets bottlenecked down. And that really makes issues. It can make velocity issues for the fish to pass, but it can also make that kind of natural processes where that stream isn't really doing what it normally would do. Just a light and kind of coarse level image, but wanted to show that. So here we are. This is about 2 years ago at this point in the slides. We've got our county road barrier data, and we need to move on to this true cross-jurisdictional prioritization. So again, collaborative approach. I love pictures. This is the Kalawa. The last one was the Upper Ho. And there's barriers in view here that are hard to see. Lots and lots of partners. We developed a work group. This is getting into phase 2 now, where we're going to build what we're calling a decision support tool. And I'm going to show you more about that. Here's the decision support tool here. So this is a lot of work from our partners and ourselves to you. We collected 7 different data sets. So we have the WDFW data set, which is available online. And we also overlaid Olympic National Park, U.S. Forest Service, Washington Department of Natural Resources. The tribes had their own databases, like Quinault Tribe's database is pretty robust. And we've done a lot of reconciling here. There was a lot of duplicates. There was a lot of misinformation, and we're always working things out. But this is basically an image of our decision support tool. The nice thing here is with this particular project, we have all the partners and tribes partnering or part of this work group, and we're meeting quarterly, if not more often. And we're prioritizing these for fixes. So once the partners can really agree upon the prioritization, essentially these are tier 1 sites for correction. These are tier 2. It really helps the collaboration in terms of getting funding. Instead of competing for funding, like grant funds to get these things fixed, we're kind of all cohesive now. And it's really great, just since this has been moving, to see some of the large landowners, like commercial forest timber landowners and DNR, they are really wanting to allow other partners to raise money and fix some of their own issues. Again, the biggest benefit with this is that this is true ecological prioritization. This is not opportunistic. We're really trying to fix the most important barriers for the fish rather than ones that are available for, a landowner that's willing. You can see on the left, there's a lot of options here. You guys certainly don't need to understand these, but all of these, what I would say, are metrics in the decision support tool as to how things are getting prioritized, which sites are getting prioritized. One nice thing about this decision support tool is we can weight these metrics. If we wanted to identify barriers that are the top priority for salmon, we can do that over here on the left and weight them and then go ahead and look. If we just wanted to prioritize for a certain region, let's just say you're with the Ho tribe and you wanted to look within the Ho usual and custom fishing grounds where they have treaty rights, you could filter and sort, and basically, really this filter tool on another page, you can look at just those and prioritize within a region. So this has never been done before on the Western Peninsula. We're all really excited. DFW is really excited. The tribes are excited. Good stuff. And we're just kind of at the crux of this. What's image that you see isn't public yet. This is part of our project, which is going to wrap up about midsummer. But pretty exciting stuff. And they've done this similar stuff in Upper Columbia and in the Chehalis. So it's not a new idea, but this is the first time we've done it on the Western OP. So this has been leading up projects. Moving along, I'm going to move a little bit back here. This is all part of the decision support tool. Essentially, we had to weight things and try to do a little bit of assumption. So as you can see, we kind of weighted habitat potential versus some modeling efforts, really powerful models. 25% habitat quantity temperatures is really important. Things like that. So it's definitely a pretty robust model, and it's gotten some good scrutiny, and it's really passed that with thumbs up from a lot of folks that are smarter than me in terms of the modeling and stuff. Now we're getting into, we don't have to read this, but it shows the complexity a little bit.
Hey, Luke.
We have a prioritized list of barriers. How are we going to get to, yes.
I don't know for everyone else, but my screen is frozen on the map that you had of all the culverts.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, same with mine.
Okay. It's a bunch of circles overlapping.
Right now we're looking at the Western OP Fish Barrier Decision Support Tool data and metrics. That map.
Well, shoot.
All right, let's do
Okay,
this. Can
let's see
can
here.
everyone turn off your cameras for me, please? You just gotta hit the little button that looks like a camera. Thank you. That sometimes makes it go a little bit faster. And Luke, do you want to maybe just try restarting the presentation? There we go. Okay, I see what you're looking at now.
Sure. Do you see the circle?
I see the circle. It looks like you're in the main, like in just normal PowerPoint, and I see your mouse moving a little bit.
Okay, so the circle that you're seeing, those are the metrics and how we weighted them. And basically, there's just a lot of elements to decide on why is a barrier important. I'm going to advance a slide. Let me know if you can see it advance to a bunch of bubbles that overlap.
Not yet. Oh, there we go. Yep, we're good. It's just a little laggy.
Okay, so I'll try to, once we have, let's just say 10 barrier sites that are well vetted by stakeholders to get fixed. This is what has to have phase 3, that green bubble. So we filled data gaps. We've done our prioritization with stakeholders. And now it's time to develop a project and get it funded so then we can get it fixed. And this just shows basically the life cycle of a barrier site or barrier project. And there's a lot of moving parts. So it's just good to understand that once we identify a barrier, that's a big deal, or that's important. There are a lot of people that come on board and that are really ready and willing to do this, including funders. So I'm going to advance a slide now, and we're moving right through. This is great. We're already halfway through. You should see kind of a linear image now with arrows pointing toward the right, arrows of different colors.
Not yet.
Okay, I have another idea. I'm gonna pull up the PDF and I'm gonna abandon the PowerPoint. Please stand by here.
It just popped up.
Okay, stop sharing. Yeah, I'm sure. I just think for the sake of
Yep, that sounds good to me.
Let's try this one. Okay. Messing with my flow here. Thanks for the patience. Okay, so I'm gonna go back over here and share my screen. I was afraid all day it was been a problem, which it hasn't been for quite a while. Here we go. Okay, sharing now. Let me know when you got arrows popping up.
Yep.
Great. I think this is going to work. I should have done this from the beginning, knowing that it was going to be an issue. Is the Zoom okay? Is it reasonable?
Yep.
It's good for me.
Okay. Okay, great. So, you guys can see this here. Basically, we've done the evaluation in terms of filling data gaps. And then priority list, see the drop down? So we got our priorities, let's say. We got a bunch of culverts. We all agree this is the most important one. This is next in line. But then there's all these other elements that have to happen before it actually gets fixed. So we're going to move to a place that's been getting fixed. And that's the Wising Creek and a tributary. It's a barrier correction project that we've been working on with Clallam County for a few years. We're in proposal phase for phase 2, which would be actual construction. But working with the county, we've designed these culverts. This is just, let's see here, west of Lake Crescent, not too far, on the upper Solduck, and Wising Creek flows from north to south. It actually flows through these county road culvert barriers. There's 3 right in the close vicinity. And then it flows down right under Highway 101. And part of this project was in collaboration and kinds of timing with the WashDOT and their barrier on Highway 101, which is one of those injunction barriers that the state is required to fix. So ideally, in the next couple of years, all of these will be fixed. So I'm just going to run through a few elements as we got this one moving. This is, sorry, I pulled some of this from my proposal here. But it's a pretty expensive implementation. So we have it designed for about 1/10 this amount. It took us about $100,000 to design it, but actually to construct it, you see at the bottom, it's going to be over $1 million. I think that, and again, that's 3 barriers. But this is probably a little bit overshot. I'm hoping that it doesn't turn out to be this much. But Wisen Creek is pretty darn important for coho and steelhead, and there's some speculation that Chinook might use it for rearing in their first year of life. I don't need to read these. These are going to go quick, but basically this is a project we're trying to do some cost effectiveness and doing 3 barrier designs in one. And that is underway and funded. And again, phase 2, which we're having proposal phase in the legislature right now. Depends on how the legislative budget turns out, but we might get funded to go ahead and construct next summer. And I also included this in here. I was hoping if we had a minute, if you guys haven't seen this, maybe jot it down, but like Wild Salmon Center and the ones that termed the Coldwater Connection campaign, they did like a 6-minute film that tried to garner support and educate on why they're trying to do this Coldwater Connection campaign. And there's a picture of yours truly in the film, and that's the Wisen Creek. That's one of the Wisen Creek barriers. So if you just Google Coldwater Connection salmon, it'll come right up, and it's a free 6-minute little shot. I wanted to mention that the Wisen Creek got highlighted. That's not supposed to be there. I'm not sure. I thought I deleted these. This is the location. So you should see a map here. You can see the Sole Duck River. Yeah, I don't think you guys need to know a whole lot more than that for now. Then a few pictures. So culverts, water surface drop issues. This one in particular actually has a water line coming out of it. It's a water source for a private residence. These are pretty straightforward projects. There's not a lot of road fill on top of them. But the one nice thing is, this is going through each of the sites. I'm going to move on through. What I left in here from some of the project funding work is that this one got ranked number 1 2 years ago to get designed because it had been vetted by the local community. The local lead entity group for salmon recovery put this on their project list, but it had been on there as a high priority, top tier project. And then in going through to try to really get a project fixed and get it funded, you got to do your homework. So some of these other slides are just showing the homework that we've done. In the Coast Sustainable Salmon Plan, it talks about the need to work and fix barriers first. It also talks about working with road and transportation improvements, work with the agencies and counties, for example. There's limiting factors report, which document, the need to fix barriers, watershed analysis. I'm just kind of scrolling through here. These are just literature that I have to use to get funded because there's sometimes very heavy competition. This one is pretty cool though. If you can see this, it says hierarchical strategy endorsed by RIA 20 lead entity strategy. The point here is they're pulling on scientific literature as to how to prioritize all salmon restoration. And one of the top ones, and probably the top one, when it says underline in bold here, should be implemented before other techniques, is reconnecting isolated habitats, including blocked habitats from barriers like culverts. So all the work that we're doing, with the BAT or with me out, on the field on the OP is really one of the top tier issues when it comes to salmon and steelhead habitat. It's got the most, it's got the quickest response and the most rate of success. So moving through some of that science stuff, we talked about a lot of the benefits. There are some other pictures here that I left in. I really like to focus on the tribes and how much they're working to fix habitat and barriers. And we're in a pretty good position. I'm hoping, this is preliminary, but we're entering into a place where we can have a strong partnership with the Hoh tribe. And they may be able to, if all works out, we're hoping to get an internship. And they've come to me and TU to maybe train a young person interested in natural resources to then shadow why we do this barrier work so that the Hoh tribe can do it themselves. They can sponsor their own projects, they can get their own funding and things. So that picture right down on the right triggers some of that for me. And then this one up on the right is a barrier that we removed. That's that same barrier. We got a picture of that 13-foot wide one with kind of that bottleneck. But you can see the person in the background. That is a very large pipe. And once you get that out of the stream, it's amazing the response. The year after we removed that pipe, there were steelhead and the blueback sockeye, the endemic blueback sockeye spawning upstream of this pipe. And when I went to do a site visit this spring, I stumbled onto a black bear that was right where that guy was standing in the middle of the stream. So kind of fun stuff. Thanks for hanging in there and listening to my rambling. Moving right along. I wanted to leave this slide in here. You should see something that says Oregon Salmon Superhighway. So TU and partners are heavy at work doing a very similar thing down in Oregon in Tillamook Bay and those drainages. They've been underway for a little bit longer, but they've had a lot of success. They have had a little different challenge where we have approximately 280 barriers that are high priority, but it would take fixing the majority of them to get to 95% of the habitat connected, where the Oregon Salmon Superhighway, the way their barriers and stream network works, if they fix approximately half of their barriers, they're going to fix more than 3/4 of their issues. You're going to access. It's going to open up habitat, 3/4 of the blocked habitat. So it's a really good example. And if you're a TU or like we all are on this call, you might want to just look into Salmon Superhighway because they're doing some pretty cool work down there. We know that a lot of these watersheds are special. I always like to plug the multi-use. This is important for the fish. It's important for the ecosystem. But that West OP is a special place. And if any of you have ever been out there, and I hope you have, it has a lot of access, and there's been a lot of anglers. It's been a tough winter this year with the steelhead boat closure. But I like pictures, so we left this one on. And essentially, that's pretty much what I have. I tried to keep it short and sweet. I look forward to reporting back on the Wising Creek barriers. It was hard to choose one because there's a few kind of exciting or hot potatoes right now that I'd like to share, but that's what I have.
Awesome. Thanks, Luke. That's really interesting about the Salmon Superhighway. I hadn't heard of that. But at this time, if anyone's got questions, go ahead and start spitting them out.
Luke, this is Andrew Kennefic. On a project like Wising Creek, is there a sort of a calculation as to how many, what the holding capacity is once you've taken the barrier out? And can you kind of equate that in terms of prioritizing it with the dollars spent to remove the barrier? In other words, sort of dollars per salmon. Is that a metric that is discernible?
Yeah. It's a little bit complex. So DFW used to use what they would call a PI, a priority index. And the priority index accounted for the potential habitat gain in terms of miles, the potential spawning area in terms of square feet, and the potential rearing area in terms of square feet. Those are three of the main metrics involved in that. But then they also included these different scores for habitat quality, riparian cover, and diversity. And they have more or less, if a barrier site has a PI score, they'll take it and they'll look at it and use it and they'll help to rank for funding. But they're kind of stepping away from priority index. And what they really like is locally vetted or at least regionally vetted prioritization efforts where you have local communities, biologists, infrastructure, whether it be WashDOT, county roads, city roads, they've all kind of put in on this and said, yes, for our region, these are the most important barriers. And then they can point to the actual science, whether it's a priority index. We also have an intrinsic potential model that's used a lot. But whenever we can do a habitat survey and get some of these details, it may not lead all the way to the priority index because there's a lot of factors to get to that PI. They will be able to do just at minimum the potential habitat gain in terms of length, And then if they get a full habitat survey, they will generally do a spawning and rearing habitat area, which are just really key. But in terms of getting how many salmon that will produce, or in terms of a productivity metric, not as much. But I a little long-winded, but yeah, that there's a lot of work toward that.
It's probably a dangerous question to ask, because then somebody says, well, it costs you $1 million and you recover 10 salmon. So every salmon's, $100,000, and that may not, that's not something, maybe a metric we want to have to deal with. Although, we could probably make the case that maybe it's worthwhile to do that. But
I think that's a good point. I think that's a very good point. And my day-to-day, sometimes I have to answer that. We try not to pick those sites that don't have the bang for the buck. But just like I was trying to explain with the Salmon Superhighway, they have sites that are getting 10 miles of gain. They're opening up 10 miles of habitat. On the Western OP specifically, we have a whole bunch of barriers, but they're opening up half a mile here, quarter mile there, maybe a mile and a half. We have a couple exciting ones. We have one, we're batching 3 more barriers on 2 different stream systems into one funding proposal this year. We're right in the middle of it, but it's going to open up about 9.5 miles for 3 different sites. And that's pretty good for the Western OP to average 3 miles a site. But not as exciting. One good news there is there's been a lot of work on these barriers in terms of correcting them in the past 10 years. So the ones that are left out there are the ones that we're finding, right? The BAT team is hopefully finding on private properties. The Forest Service is really behind on a lot of their inventories. They certainly could use some help. And I think that there's going to be some little gold mines there in terms of particular sites that can really, reconnect more than 10 salmon, hopefully, to their habitats. But yeah, Andrew, I think you're right on point that it can be certainly criticized. And, the funders, whether federal or the state legislatures, there's salmon fatigue. How much does it cost to fix all these barriers? And plus this state, is on the hook for a whole lot of barriers around Puget Sound and the OP for the injunction. So something to be sensitive about and trying to get cost-effective projects.
Yeah, but you start to talk about it in terms of jobs, economic, the dollars from, anglers and tourism, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
I do worry about that, but kind of screw it. Let's get the barriers out of the way.
Mm-hmm. The decision support tool has been a real eye opener for our region on the OP, where you had folks that are institutional knowledge. I mean, been around much, much longer than me. And some are a little surprised at what's come out of that. And luckily, it's not like we have 300 sites that are a surprise, but there seem to be a pretty clear 50 sites that if we can fix them in the next 10 years, we're going to be able to open up a couple 100 miles of habitat. So, but jobs, yeah, on the coast is big, of course. You mentioned jobs and the unemployment rate. In fact, some of our funding is what we call WICRI, state funding, the Washington Restoration and Resiliency Initiative. Puget Sound and Upper gets a lot of the restoration funding because of ESA listed species. We're out on the OP, it's pretty rural and relatively we haven't gotten the funding in the past. So WICRI has been a big help for us.
Is that $1 million price tag about typical for most of those barriers?
It's really hard to put a finger on it, but for let's just say Western Olympic Peninsula county road barriers, to get one designed to a permit level, like phase 1, as I would call it, it could be for a single pipe, a single site, let's say, up to $100,000 or so, as long as it's not Highway 101, it's just a rural county road. 60,000 is probably more realistic to get it designed. And then for implementation or construction, it would be it all over the place, right? It depends on the approach from the road fill depth, the size of the stream, but it can range from $100,000 to construct it to multi-million dollars, like we're seeing on WashDOT, which is an extreme example. For the Wisen Creek, you saw 1.3 million to implement or construct that. I think that in the end, once we go to competitive bid with contractors, it'll probably be more like 800,000. So 200, 250 per site, if you will, to get those constructed. But yeah, definitely not inexpensive.
So, Carl Bevis, I mean, it's sort of a rhetorical question. I mean, you mentioned there's a lot of barriers, and you mentioned 10 years. So what's the limiting factor here? Because, I mean, time is really of the essence in getting a lot of these things done. Is it funding? Is it just process? Or is it available contractors to bid on stuff and all that kind of? I mean, is there it's all
Yeah.
path. What's kind of the limiting factor, do you think?
First was the limiting factor was kind of agreeing on the priorities instead of kind of competing with one another in terms of project sponsors to get funding. But now that we have some priorities and we're looking at 5 years ahead, I think it's funding. I do think with enough dollars, or if you could batch enough sites together, like we're staging for the next round of WICRI funding, and then the next round of Fish Burial Remover Board funding, which is biennium. Like, we're 2 years away from when that's really going to happen. We're trying to, instead of like, I'm going to put in one and the other partners are going to put in one, we're saying, okay, I'm going to put in 5. You guys are going to put in 3. And we can really vet it. We can show all this effort that's been put forth, but it is very expensive. These sites are not cheap. And, some sites are bigger streams, and there's a strategy in terms of where we work on size of streams, but also in the drainage compared to other barrier sites that have been done. Or there are places where there might be cold water that's being blocked low in a main stem river, like let's say low in the Hoh River. There's a couple major barriers on Oil City Road, and we have to deal with federal highways, Western Federal Lands, Federal Highways Department, because it accesses federal lands, the Olympic National Park on the coast. And there's a lot of mitigation involved. So some of it is just bureaucratic challenges. But I do think that with the partners that are implementing now, the partners that you've seen some of on these slides, we have a lot of interest from private foundations. Some of them are nationwide foundations, but they supported this decision support tool and they funded that. And we gave them a 5-year plan as to what we'd like to see. And again, it's not doing 30 barrier projects a year. And some of that limiting factor is capacity. So I was trying to lead to that, but just having project sponsors that can steward a project from development through design, through completion is another one. So funding and capacity on the coast are both challenges.
Who are those funders?
That's coming from Open Rivers Fund. And they are into dam removal. And with our partners, I can't take much credit here. Obviously, we're TU, and I think that we bring a lot of value to this partnership. But we have convinced them that these culverts are like miniature dams. So they're really into dam removal. Well, here we go. We have a bunch of mini dams to work on. So I know that TU Nationwide, TU National has been working on cracking the nut with Open Rivers Fund and their sub program, Resource Legacy Fund. It's been 3 years in the making, but we've got funded and again, very preliminary. Please keep this between us for now, but we're putting a proposal forward and they're only comfortable with 1 year of funding at a time, but we're looking at millions of dollars to try to move more than just 2 projects forward per year.
Is that a private fund or is that a government?
That's a private funded foundation. Look up Open Rivers Fund and they fund some pretty big projects.
Yeah, I'm looking them up now. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Anyone have any other questions for Luke before we let him go tuck his kids in for bed, if they're not already in bed?
Well, Carl, here more about habitat quality out there on the OPs. I mean, everything's pretty good. I would think. The times I've been out there stomping around, versus when you get into Puget Sound, you got lots of road runoff and all that rigmarole. So the tool really has probably some weighting factors where you can sort of get the habitat quality into the whole assessment. I guess what I was thinking when you look around King County, I mean, there's a gazillion people and roads and everything in between. And, how good is the water that's ending up in the creeks, that kind of thinking.
Yeah.
So more about if the tool is used statewide, how effective would it be in really eliminating spending a lot of resource, in some place that doesn't have a lot of potential based on human activity more than anything.
Yeah, Carl, I think that's a good point because you can look at that right now with, development around Puget Sound. And you can also look at future projections regardless of development, whether projected or current. But just looking at 2080 climate change predictions on stream temperature, we're correcting barriers right now. And when I say we, not to you necessarily, but that if you look at climate change projections, they're going to be too warm, for certain life histories of salmon. So that's a big can of worms you're opening, and I'm with you to truly prioritize. And we are lucky on the OP. There's plenty of challenges. You start looking at the satellite imagery on any of those maps, barrier maps, the DFW map, or even our maps that we have at TU, the council map. And some of those are, fish streams. So with timber harvest, they get a buffer, but the buffer is pretty weak and they get blow down, which isn't all bad, but it is important to look at the quantity of the habitat, but also the quality, and then also try our best to look ahead, 50 years or so and see just pure temperatures. Is that going to be changing from a snow-fed system to a rain-fed system? Is that going to have water temperatures that are viable for fish? It's a real puzzle. But not to be discouraged.
Yeah, well, thanks. I guess I have a sort of a weird detailed question. Like when you're doing all these, do you ever use drones to have a look?
Yeah. That's something that's been on our radar. We have this climate change model. It's started with the UW Climate Impacts Group, and then DFW has been kind of tuning it to more salmon specific, but it's still kind of course level. You can get segments of stream that shows what the temperature will be, in 2040 and 2080. But having a drone, to get a look and get that kind of imagery, you can get a sense of the real forest stand diversity and age with that. If you don't have LiDAR, which is like a more intensive kind of bare earth topography. And then you can also use the first return of that LiDAR bouncing off the earth. The first return, you can get the foliage and the trees. You can kind of get some of the stand diversity from there. But there's something about a drone imagery that can be really helpful. They have something called, some TU staff are using it already, photogrammetry. There's another name for it. Nick, are you familiar with that? Where they use a drone and they fly a grid pattern and they get 3-dimensional shots that eventually gets a very detailed topographic map of the watershed, or at least the corridor where the river is in the floodplain.
I briefly remember covering that in college, very briefly. So I'm not an expert.
Photogrammetry is one word, but there's a better name. Gosh darn it, I can't believe I'm not thinking of it. But no, another thing with drones too is you can put a laser temperature sensor, and that's something that we're also talking about on some of these high priority sites. Because we're not going to be able to get to all of them because of the cost and the timeline and capacity, is flying some of them with a FLIR on a drone to get actual water surface temperature, maybe 4 times a year. It's a really good tool that you can cover a lot of ground, get a lot of data in a relatively short period of time. So I think drones are very, very good. We're working on getting ortho imagery, which is very detailed, not quite that photogrammetry detail, but pretty detailed for other work, not just barrier work, but looking at how channels are changing over time. We're in the middle of a big project in the Middle Ho River, doing a resiliency plan for 15 miles of the Middle Ho. And we're doing some of that stuff.
All right. Is everyone?
Well, I guess one more quick question. So, are there a lot of small contractors that are just available and ready to go to, bring their backhoe and do the work?
Yeah, there does seem to be a fair amount of contractors on the west end, what we call the west end. Some of them are really good. There's a lot that are used to be in the commercial timber industry, and they're still in the industry, but they're a little displaced. So they're doing road work, and culverts and roads go hand in hand. In fact, that one picture with that large pipe, and you can see the gentleman that was small in the picture. He was a former forester that started kind of a resources business to do this work. It is kind of tough, I'll say, that some of the contractors have learned the hard way. If they have a project to install or replace a barrier site with a new culvert or something, they're usually putting in a much larger structure, like a box culvert or a bridge, like a small bridge. And that takes a little more expertise or training. And it's not as easy as a DNR forest road where you put in a 36-inch culvert. So that's been a little challenging depending on the complexity of the site. Not all the contractors have the qualifications, but there does seem to be a good number of contractors. In fact, another thing we're working on for that Middle Hill Resiliency Project is one of the chapters that I'm writing is the local capacity to supply restoration needs. Long story short, a little tangent here. We go off and write this wonderful resiliency plan and all these projects, and it's backed by the best available science. But if we don't have the capacity as a sponsor like TU to implement the project, we don't have the funding capacity, or we don't have the contractors to actually build it, that's a gap. So we're trying to identify some of those capacity gaps to get some of this work done, and training and creating incentives for some of these families that are really good at working in the woods. They know wood, they know water, they know machines, but they just haven't really done this type of work before. We're talking about working with a couple of agencies and institutions like UW to try to get some incentives and training for those folks.
All right. Is everyone's brains happy and content?
I love the questions. I really appreciate it. Those are some good, sharp, challenging questions.
Yeah. Good question.
Hey, Luke, do you have an iPad? A current iPad?
Do I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, mine's a little old, but yeah, I have one.
Well, the newer ones are now coming equipped with LiDAR, so you can just take your iPad out and get your imagery.
Yeah, that's great. LiDAR, true LiDAR is pretty cumbersome, and it's not available everywhere. So depending on what LiDAR you're talking about, usually, like if I'm working on a project site, I will download it from the DNR LiDAR portal. And just downloading a little 1 acre patch around a barrier is it's just a large file. There's a lot of data there. But
sure.
I'm not a LiDAR expert. I use it, but I don't understand all the data. Like for me to talk about first return of LiDAR to get the canopy and the foliage is about as deep as I generally go. I do depend on my engineering contractors for that, though. They use it a lot.
Who are the design contractors we tend to use?
Multiple kinds. It depends on the project. We definitely, like for me as staff and using grant funds, state, federal and such, we have a pretty strict procurement policy to make sure we're fair. So almost any contract goes to competitive bid. And we also post on the Women and Minority Owned Business and Small Business Administration site, just so that any firms interested have an opportunity to bid. But some of my larger projects, we use Natural Systems Design. I've also got some really great bids from Interfluve Incorporated. They're out of Hood River, Oregon. In terms of barrier sites and actually engineering the replacement structure for barriers, we've used KPFF. We've used SRT Engineering. I really have liked some of the bids I've gotten from Sargent Engineering and Tetra Tech. Those are two different firms. I could ramble a little further, but there are quite a few out there. It depends on the project. Like Natural Systems Design is not one that we go to for barrier correction projects. That's more for in-stream habitat work or riparian kind of treatment work to get, to try to promote toward a true old growth, diverse forest in terms of forest management.
So do you handle the contracting, or is that done through the agencies?
I do. We do. Yeah, me personally, some TU staff will contract out certain elements. Having a contracting business in the past in Colorado, I like to try to, I'm not a control person, but being a project manager and my name and TU's name's on the permit, I try to manage all of that. So I do my own bid procurement with partners and we rank them together. But I post all of that. And we'll manage the construction too. Some folks will hire a firm like an engineering firm to actually manage the construction for them. So they may be the project manager, but the actual building of the structure per the plans is on the project, the construction manager. But and it's so far with TU, I've always managed my own construction.
So do you ever get involved with the FFFPP?
Yeah, the Family Forest and Fish Pastures Program. We've had some interaction and engagement, but I have not gotten FFFPP funding, and I have not proposed for FFFPP. There's a couple of projects that went for FFFPP, weren't able to get it, and then somehow they ended up on my list. And those are moving now. They're not completed, but there's one in the Chehalis that we're working on. There's another one in our decision support tool on the West End OP that we're looking at. It's on the FFFPP list, but the landowner, I think it changed ownership, so it's not going very far now. But yeah, familiar with that one, and we haven't done much with that, but definitely a good resource.
Luke, can you make sure you put up the slide with your contact information again?
Sure.
I think it was luke.kelly@tu.org.
You got
right?
it. Yep. I'll put it up here real quick.
Now, are you on the Olympic Peninsula, or where are you located?
I'm in Olympia.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm lucky. We TU prize ourselves by hiring staff that live and work in the basins. But I was with the Suquamish tribe before in Puget Sound, and I'm thankful. I do love the West End. I like that rural environment, but I live on my wife's family's farm. They homesteaded here just outside of Nisqually. So it was a kind of a dream come true to move from Seattle down here and take this position. And they've been okay with it. So I do a lot of traveling. In fact, I'm getting up about 5 a.m. tomorrow to go up there, and we're going to do some field verification on some of our priority barriers. So once we have these priorities, we'll go and walk the stream upstream and downstream just to make sure there's no surprises, make sure there's no natural barriers, make sure there's no culverts that are undocumented, things like that.
How big is the BAT team that goes out into the OP?
We're still getting going. It's pretty far out there, Nick. I mean, we haven't really had a formalized OP BAT team work there yet. They're training. We're having this training on Friday virtual and then Saturday, but it's actually on the Kitsap Peninsula. But it's within the realm of the Kitsap OP chapter that has that in their range.
Yeah, right now there's only one person that's trained in BAT on the peninsula, but we have at least 7 signed up right now for our training this week. So we'll have a solid crew on that side, and hopefully we just keep getting more and more and more.
Well, come summertime, maybe you can drain some people from the Seattle side to go over there. That might be a fun weekend.
Yeah, definitely.
That would be great. It would be fun. We could go use our training and survey a couple sites, but we need help too. If anybody is willing and capable of hiking up and bushwhacking through some of these smaller streams in the summer, we need to do some more field verification. And while we do that, we look for juvenile coho, juvenile fish, because that really helps. If you can see the fish upstream of the barrier, there's not a ton of documentation on some of that. There might be a barrier and it might have the fish use potential, but if it's not documented fish use, it's not surveyed for spawner surveys and such. Literally seeing some fish in the stream upstream of the barrier is a real help in terms of getting some of these to get fixed.
If there's any way of getting information about those sort of opportunities, circulated to even this group. I don't know if that's through you, Nick, or what, but that would really be great. I'd go over.
Yeah, I'm with you, Andrew. I mean, go over, camp out a couple days, and slog around. That would be fun.
I do that too.
Yeah. Whenever people send me stuff, I try and send it out to the group. So
You're muted.
oh. Whenever people send me stuff, I try to send it out to the group. So Luke, if you got stuff, send it my way, and I'll distribute it accordingly.
Yeah. So Nick, when you've got these people trained in Ellensburg and on the OP, will you kind of then have kind of bring everybody else into the fold on like these calls and the emails? That would be great.
Everyone's just going to be part of the one big bat program, basically. If the people on the east side and on the OP might want to get together and do things on their own, but everyone will be included in like our Culvert Tuesday emails and the webinars and all that stuff, because we want everyone to stay educated in case there is any updates or anything like that. And they all still have stuff that either I need to get from them or that we need to manage the equipment and whatnot. So we're all connected.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah. All right. With that being said, it sounds like we're good on questions. Luke, thank you again. We really appreciate it. And feel free to drop in on any of the meetings you want. I know you're busy, though, so keep doing what you're doing. I did want to say that I got a new job, and my hours are pretty demanding. So I'm looking to change our webinars to Thursdays. I'll send an email out about it, but I want to let you guys know that we're hoping to do Thursday evenings instead of Tuesday evenings. That way I can, because sometimes I'll be working till midnight, so it just depends. But I'll let you guys know and send out an email about it.
Way to go, Nick. All right.
Thank you.
Get your beauty sleep.
I know, yeah, it's time for bedtime. I'm going to shower and go to bed. All right.
Thank you, Nick.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good
Thanks,
one.
Nick.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.